3, 2, 1, go. To comment or not to comment. Comments are easier to write poorly than well, and commenting can be more damaging than helpful. The heated discussion over the virtues of commenting often sounds like the philosophical debates over moral virtues, which makes me think that if Socrates had been a computer programmer, he and his students might have the following discussion. Commento. Characters. Thrasymachus, a green, theoretically purist who believes everything he reads. Calicos, a battle-hardened veteran from the old school, a real programmer. Glaucon, a young, confident, hotshot computer jock. Ismene, a senior programmer tired of big promises, just looking for a few practice that works. Socrates, the wise old programmer. Setting. End of the team's daily stand-up meeting. Does anyone have any other issues before we get back to work? Socrates asked. I want to suggest a commenting standard for our project, Thrasymachus said. Some of our programmers barely comment their code, and everyone knows that code without comments isn't readable. You must be fresher out of college than I thought, Calicos responded. Comments are an academic panacea, but everyone who's done any real programming knows that comments makes the code harder to read, not easier. English is less precise than Java or Visual Basic and makes lots of excess verbiage. Programming language statements are short and to the point. If you can't make the code clear, how can you make the comments clear? Plus, comments get out of date as code changes. If you believe an out-of-date comments, you're sunk. I agree with that, Glaucon joined. Heavily commented code is harder to read because it means more to read. I have already had to read the code. Why should I have to read a lot of comments too? Wait a minute, Ismene said, putting down her coffee mug into her two judgment words. I know that commenting can be abused, but good comments are worth the weight in gold. I've had to maintain code that had comments and code that didn't. And I'd rather maintain the code with comments. I don't think we should have a standard that says use one comment for every X lines of code, but we should encourage everyone to comment. If comments are a waste of time, why does anyone use them, Calicos? Socrates asked. Either because they're required to, or because they read somewhere that they're useful. No one who's thought about it could ever decide they're useful. Ismene thinks they're useful. She's been here 3 years, maintaining your code without comments and other code with comments. And she prefers the code with comments. What do you think make of that? Comments are useless because they just repeat the code in more verbose. Wait right there, Thrasymachus interrupted. Good comments don't repeat the code or explain it. They clarify its intent. Comments should explain at a higher level of abstraction than the code what you're trying to do. Right, Ismene said. I scanned the comments to find the sections that does what I need to change or fix. You're right that comments that repeat the code don't help at all because the code says everything already. When I read comments, I want it to be like reading headings of a book or a table of contents. Comments help me find the right section, and then I start writing the code. It's a lot faster to read one sentence in English than it is to paste 20 lines of code in a programming language. Ismene poured herself another cup of coffee. I think that people who refuse to read comments, maybe number one, think their code is clearer than it could possibly be. Number two, thinks that other programmers are far more interested in their code than they really are. Number three, think other programmers are smarter than they really are. Or number four, are lazy. Or number five, are afraid of someone else might figure out how their code works. Code reviews would be a big help here, Socrates. Ismene continued. If someone claims that they don't need to write some comments and are bombarded by questions during a review, when several peers start saying, "What the heck you're trying to do in this piece of code?" Then they'll start putting in comments. If they don't do it on their own, at least the managers will have the ammo to make them do it. I'm not accusing you of being lazy or afraid that people will figure out your code, Calicos. I've worked on your code, and you're one of the best programmers in the company. But have a heart, huh? Your code will be easier for me to work on if you use comments. But there are waste of resources, Calicos responded. A good programmer's code should be self-documenting, and everything you need to know should be in the code. No way! Thrasymachus was out of his chair. Everything the compiler needs to know is in the code. You might as well argue that everything you need to know is in the binary executable file if you're smart enough to read it. What is meant to happen is not in the code. Thrasymachus realized he was standing up and sat down. Socrates, this is ridiculous. Why do we have to argue about whether comments are valuable? Everything I've ever read says that they're valuable and should be used liberally. We're wasting our time. Cool down, Thrasymachus. Ask Calicus how long he's been programming. How long, Calicus? Well, I started on Acropolis for about 15 years ago. I guess about I've seen about a dozen major systems from the time they were born to the time we gave them a cup of hemlock. And I've worked on a major part of a dozen more. Two of those systems had over 500,000 lines of code, so I know what I'm talking about. Comments are pretty useless. Socrates looked at the younger programmer. Is Calicus says comments have a lot of legitimate problems, and you won't realize that without more experiences. If they're not done right, they're worse than useless. Even when they're done right, they're useless, Calicus said. Comments are less precise than a programming language. I'd rather not to have them at all. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, Socrates said. Ismene agrees that comments are less precise. Her point is that comments give you a higher level of abstraction. And we all know that levels of abstraction are one of a programmer's most powerful tools. I don't agree with that, Glaucon replied. Instead of focusing on comments, you should focusing on making code more readable. Refactoring eliminates most of my comments. Once I've refactored, my code might have 20 or 13 routine calls without needing any comments. A good programmer can read the intent from the code itself. And what good does it do to read about someone's intent when you know that the code has an error? Glaucon was pleased with his contribution. Calicus nodded. It sounds like you guys never had to modify someone else's code, Ismene said. Calicus suddenly seems very interested in the pencil marks on the ceiling tiles. Why don't you try reading your own codes 6 months or a year after you write it? You can improve your code reading ability and your commenting. You don't have to choose one or the other. If you're reading a novel, you may not want the section heading. But if you're reading a technical book, you like to be able to find what you're looking for quickly. I shouldn't have to switch to ultra concentration mode and read hundreds of lines of code just to find 2 lines of code I want to change. Alright, I can see it would be handy to be able to scan code, Glaucon said. He'd seen some of Ismail's programs and was impressed. But what about Calicus' other point? That comments get out of date as code changes. I've only been programming for a couple of years, but even I know that nobody updates their comments. Well, yes, no, Ismail said. If you take the comments as Socrates and code as suspicious, you're in deep trouble. Actually, finding a disagreement between the comments and the code tends to mean both are wrong. The fact that some comments are bad doesn't mean that commenting is bad. I'm going to the lunchroom to get another cup of coffee. Ismene left the room. My main objections to comments, Calicus said, is that they're a waste of resources. Can anyone think of ways to minimize the time it takes to write the comments? Socrates asked. Design routines in procedure code, and then convert the procedure code into comments and fill in the code between them, Glaucon said. Okay, that will work as long as the comments don't repeat the code, Calicus said. Writing a comment makes you think harder about what your code is doing, Ismail said, returning from the lunchroom. If it's hard to comment, it's either it's bad code or you don't understand it well enough. Either ways, you need to spend more time on the code. So the time you're spending commenting wasn't wasted because it pointed you to the required work. Oh, right, Socrates said. I can't think of any more questions, and I think Ismene got the best way of your guys today. We'll encourage commenting, but we won't be naive about it. We have code reviews so that everyone will get a good sense of the kind comments that actually help. If you have trouble understanding someone else's code, let them know how they can improve.